We have learned that when we play C, E, G together, we get the C chord. This triad position is also called root position. This is mainly because the lowest note is C. All chords that we learned so far were in root position. In this lesson, we will learn two other positions in which we can play each chord. Let's take the G major chord containing G, B, D. I will play this chord an octave lower. Now, instead of playing the G note down here, I could play it an octave above it, keeping the B and the D note in the same position. Obviously, I will now use different fingers to play the B and D note. Now, this is called an inversion of the G chord. This chord is still a G chord in a new position. As long as we have the notes G, B, D, it will always be a G major chord. Now, this shape is called the first inversion. Now, this means that chords can be inverted. Okay, but why would we want to invert a chord? Why can't we simply play them in root position? In order to understand this, let's compare the inverted G chord, that is the G chord in first inversion, with the C major chord that we played in root position. The C major chord contains the notes C, E, G, whereas the inverted G major chord contains the notes B, D, G, which was inverted from G, B, D. Did you notice that both these chords share a common note G? This G note can serve as an anchor while transitioning from a C major chord to a G major chord. When I play these chords with my right hand, my pinky finger does not move away from the G note. And this means that I don't have to look down at my keys in order to transition between C major chord and G major chord. Now, another reason why we use inversions is so that the chord transition sounds smoother. Now, if I were to transition from a C major chord to a G major chord using root position, the lowest note in this case would be a C note from the C major chord, and the highest note would be a D note from the G major chord. So this interval from C to D is more than an octave, and the transition sounds jumpy, okay? If I were to play the G major chord an octave below, now in this case the highest note would be the G note from the C major chord, and the lowest note would be a G note down an octave, which is still jumpy and still disconnected. So on the other hand, if we were to play inversions, so if I had to use this G major first inversion, now the lowest note is the B note and the highest note is G, which anyway is a common note for both the chords. So the interval distance is much smaller compared to if we were to play them in root position. This is why it is better to learn inversions in order to have a sweeter transition between the chords. Also, I would like you to note the fingering for the inverted G major chord. The fingering is 1, 2 and 5, whereas the fingering for C major chord in root position was 1, 3, 5. There are 3 movements, okay? I lift up the third finger, I place the second finger down, and I move the thumb down 1 note. Just like we inverted the G major chord, we will also invert the F major chord. The F major chord is made up of F, A and C. Now, instead of playing the C note up here, we could play the C note an octave below, while keeping the F and the A note in the same position. I now have F, A and C. This chord is an inversion of the F major chord. This shape is called the second inversion. Now, whenever I need to transition between C major and F major, instead of moving my entire hand up here, I can use the inversion of F. And by doing this, I do not have to leave the C note. This C note now becomes an anchor. Also note that when playing this inversion with my right hand, I use the same fingers 1, 3, 5 for both the chords. However, if I were to play these chords with my left hand, I would use the fingers 1, 2, 5 for the F chord. We can now use the inverted G major chord and inverted F major chord along with the C major chord which was played in root position. When transitioning to a G major chord, the G note is the anchor. And when transitioning to a F major chord, the C note becomes the anchor.